So the purpose of today's video is just to unpack connectivity and jargon within the industry and things that we're coming across quite often from our customers, and we're going to get Brian to answer these questions as layman as possible so people can understand what we're talking about. So Brian, I've just come from a customer right now, and one of the big buzzwords in the industry is contention and all the things around contention. Can you unpack that as simple as possible so customers out there can understand what contention is all about?
Sure. So I think contention is really about how connectivity is shared, and it's one of the challenges in the market because we always talk about comparing apples with apples. We always talk about saying to customers, you've got to make sure that the different solutions that you're being offered in the market are all comparable, and it's a difficult thing to do because not all bandwidth is equal. We know that fiber is the new big buzzword. Fiber is the new technology that everyone's after, and certain fiber links are very powerful for enterprise level customers, and certain fiber links are fine for your home users. But there's a dramatic difference between both the cost of those solutions as well as what those solutions deliver. And I think an important aspect for customers to really get their heads around is which solution is going to deliver what my business needs. It's not merely a case of I want fiber. Fiber isn't the answer. It's the type of fiber and the type of delivery that makes a big difference to businesses.
Could we maybe just also elaborate in terms of cars and lanes on a highway? Because a lot of our customers understand contention, but also from an analogy perspective and from a layman perspective, a good way also to look at it is cars. So cars on a freeway, cars going through a highway. Are you able to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, we always really enjoy using analogies to make solutions of far more layman. Our favorite analogy is traffic. So if you purchase a fiber link, it's kind of like purchasing a highway between two places, and contention is the amount of traffic that sits on that highway. So if you purchase a highway and you're the only vehicle on that highway or the only owner of that highway, you can send as many of your vehicles down that link as you want. If it's a shared or what's called a broadband service, it means that you get access to that highway with all of your trucks and cars, but 50 or 100 other companies also have access to that same highway. And ultimately what happens is that there's a huge amount of congestion. If you're lucky, if you're driving at 1 o'clock in the morning, there's probably not going to be a lot of congestion because not everyone is sending data at that time. But at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that highway becomes almost unusable. And that's the challenge around broadband services, is how many other businesses get access to that highway in order to run their cars and deliver their services across. And certainly if you're looking at very inexpensive or consumer-based fiber products, that means that 100 other companies have got access to that same highway, and the congestion in very busy business time is going to be astronomical. If you're purchasing what's called a one-to-one or guaranteed, it's going to be very expensive to own a highway by yourself, but it means that it's yours. No one else can share it, and you can use it as you need to deliver your business requirements. And I think the balance between those two extremes is what businesses need to go after.
So one of the things that we also try explain to our existing customers is like, how do we know what is the correct solution for them? You've just mentioned dedicated and broadband. Like, if we had to propose to potential customers out there based on the requirements, who would be going for a dedicated solution and who would be going for a broadband solution?
Dedicated solutions, certainly in the SME space, are relatively rare, just because for the amount of money that it costs to own that dedicated highway, it's very often prohibitive for what those businesses can spend. But you always want to look at what you want to move across that highway. So for the majority of businesses, they're talking about internet browsing, they're talking about email, they're talking about access to things like Office 365 and cloud services. The more of those items that you need access to for your users, the higher the requirement is going to go. Over and above that, the other requirement is also how many users are sitting on a network. So if you've got a 20 user business, effectively you can account that to 20 vehicles at a time. If you're purchasing a dedicated solution, those 20 users are going to be able to get across the highway pretty quickly. But there's another aspect to dedicated and broadband versus bandwidth. And bandwidth, in a very layman term, is the number of lanes. So you can have a dedicated 1-lane highway, or you can have a dedicated 50-lane highway. And obviously the amount of vehicles that you can move across that is very different. So what a lot of businesses are going for nowadays is, instead of paying a premium for a 2 or 3 lane dedicated highway, they're willing to pay a better price per lane, buying a 50-lane highway and sharing it with other users. And very often you get the benefit of that economy. It's not always that the other users or the other businesses are going to be on that highway, and you end up getting a substantial amount of that highway for a much lower cost. But ultimately it comes down to the number of users in your business and what those users are doing on a daily basis and how critical their usage is. And the criticality of internet usage is essential, because if a business, as an example, were to lose hundreds of thousands of rand every hour that they're not able to access the service, they need to consider higher end and more robust connectivity, failover links or backup links. If being down for several hours has very little impact, you can hop on your phones and do what's necessary until the link comes up. You can look at less expensive and more cost-effective solutions.
So in summary, what you are saying is that a small SME could potentially look at a consumer offering, but in high possibility that a business offering would meet more of its requirements in terms of the contention, the throughput speeds and everything like that.
Yeah, I think it's all horses for courses. You can't assume that all fiber connectivity in particular, because that's the big buzzword, or that all fiber connectivity is the same. It isn't. It's dramatically different, and that's really where finding a provider that you trust is vitally important, because it's an industry that SMEs in particular, they don't want to learn all about an entirely different industry so they can be experts in choosing their connectivity. They want to be a law firm or a manufacturer or a retailer. They want to do what they do. They don't want to deal with this kind of stuff. And technology as an industry changes so quickly and so dramatically that it's literally something that you need to dedicate all of your time to understanding. So, if customers find partners who they trust, who have access to an entire industry and are able to deliver any of those solutions to them, it goes a long way for them, washing their hands of needing to understand this industry and just saying, get me the right connectivity for my business, and these are the requirements that I have.
So you mentioned earlier a term called AUPs, which is an acceptable usage policy. Can we explain it in business terms, what that means to me as a business?
Yeah, often in all of these acronyms that industries like to use, fortunately in our industry, the acronym normally does give you a pretty good idea of what it is. So acceptable usage policy effectively means that it's a policy that governs your usage. And if your usage is acceptable, it'll leave you in a far more favorable environment to browse the internet and consume data. If your usage is unacceptable, it'll move you into that lower grade connectivity. And there's a certain these kind of statistics are drawn all the time from service providers. So they'd look at the average user of a medium to heavy usage from home, and they'd say, if this user starts abusing this level, we need to start throttling their capability down. If they're within it, they get to enjoy a far better experience. And exactly the same thing happens in business environments, where in business you really need to be doing business critical usage of your bandwidth. You can't be using it to do excessive streaming of video. You shouldn't be watching movies at work. So there's certain things that you need to control it. And if you're within those acceptable usage policies or acceptable usage limits, you will be left to browse the internet and consume data at the speeds that you have purchased. If you start abusing them, you'll be moved into other areas. And the abuse of bandwidth is a tricky one, because bandwidth is hungry, and consumers are hungry. You can take 100 meg fiber link, which in general terms is a decent speed, and one user can consume that entire link. If they're streaming video and downloading content and playing online games, one user can consume that entire resource, or that entire resource can be very effectively used by a business of 20 or 50 people.